Good evening. My name is Kate Lee, Vice President of Research and Patient Programs. Thank you for joining us tonight for the last COVID-19 and IBD webinar of this year. We have a great lineup of speakers to help you better understand a very timely topic, COVID-19 vaccines, the release of Pfizer-BioNTech's RNA vaccine, and what this means for IBD patients. Please note that this webinar is for 2 hours. With December holidays just around the corner, the second half of tonight's sessions will be an informal chat with IBDers such as yourselves on being home for the holidays. 2 hours, yes, that's a long time. I know this seems like a long time to sit in front of the computer. No worries, we're including a short break and we're aiming for the chat with the patient panel to be engaging and even fun. So we hope you'll stick around till the end. Okay, so some housekeeping. If you experience any technical problems during the webinar, try refreshing the page or browser. For additional troubleshooting, please refer to the handout found on your menu. You can also comment in the question box in the menu on the right side of your screen. Please note that this webinar is being recorded. And last, there will be a live Q&A session during the webinar. Please note that this Q&A session will cover the questions that were submitted in the registration forms. The panelists will also do their best to answer questions submitted live in the question box. Crohn's and Colitis Canada's promise is to cure Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis and improve the quality of life of children and adults affected by these diseases. This is our beacon, which we use to guide all Crohn's and Colitis Canada's activities, such as our COVID-19 webinars. We are immensely grateful to the members of our COVID-19 task force, led by Drs. Kaplan and Benchmo, who have been working tirelessly with us since March this year to review evidence, develop guidelines, and recommendations, along with holding these series of webinars. Before I hand over the reins to the co-moderators of this webinar, please keep an eye out for our announcements early next year on the dates for our COVID-19 webinars. We will also continue to hold our GLS education sessions. The dates will be confirmed early next year, but the topics will be on an introduction to biologics and biosimilars, complications of IBD, and symptom management and medical cannabis. With that, I am very pleased to introduce our fantastic moderators, whom I'm sure all of you know: Dr. Ghia Kaplan, Professor of Medicine at University of Calgary, adult gastroenterologist and epidemiologist, past chair of our Crohn's and Colitis Canada Scientific and Medical Advisory Council, and Dr. Eric Benchmo, Professor at University of Toronto, pediatric gastroenterologist at Hospital for Sick Children, and now chair of our Crohn's and Colitis Canada Scientific and Medical Advisory Council.
Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks very much.
Yeah, Eric, this has been a crazy year. I can't believe 2019 is so close to ending, and this is obviously the last webinar that we're going to be doing in the year 2020, and I think many of us are glad to see 2020 go by.
Very much so, and hoping we're seeing bright lights even today. So obviously today we're focused on vaccines, and the Pfizer vaccine was approved a couple weeks ago in Canada. Today, the FDA Advisory Committee approved the Moderna vaccine, recommended approval of the Moderna vaccine just about 2 hours ago. So it looks like the FDA will approve that, which likely means Health Canada will as well, which is good news. However, there's obviously concerns. Our patients are concerned and have a lot of questions, and I think we're going to try to cover a lot of them today.
Yeah, and I think we've got amazing panelists and segments. I mean, this whole first hour is going to be completely devoted to the vaccine, the COVID vaccine in IBD patients. We've gotten a huge number of questions from the IBD community, and we're going to try to answer most of them through presentations or through direct questions and answers through the discussion. And we have amazing panelists. Eric's going to introduce them later on, but Jean-Eric is a world-renowned communicator, has amazing slides, and is a great communicator about the vaccine. And then those of you who have followed this webinar series for a while know Lisa Barrett, who is an infectious disease specialist on our COVID task force and has been on a number of our webinar series to help kind of explain complicated risks to us as well as to the IBD community.
That's right. And then the second hour, I think we're going to lighten things up is what we're hoping for. It is the holidays, so we're going to have a few patients as well as people who are experienced in treating IBD, dietitians, nurses, and they're going to give some tips on how to survive and stay sane while staying at home and staying safe over the holidays. So I think that'll be a lot of fun. So please do stick around past the 5-minute break, and I think you'll get a kick out of the second hour.
For sure. With the one caveat being that 2 dry doctors are not going to be, like Eric and I are not.
No, we're not.
Moderating this.
we're going to step back in.
The series hour, that's us. And of which I've kind of started these webinars with kind of an update of where things have been, and this given me a good opportunity as we come to the end of the year to do kind of a year in review. And so, Sarah, if you can give me permission to take over the slides, I'll kind of show you my first slide and. Okay, so everyone should be able to see my presentation now. So I wanted to end our webinar series in 2020 with a year in review. A year ago, no one could have predicted a global pandemic like none we have seen in 100 years. In December 2019, China's Hubei province diagnosed dozens of pneumonia from an unknown cause. And by January, the first large-scale public health lockdown witnessed on our planet happened in Wuhan, a city of 11 million people. And unfortunately, on January 25th, the first case of COVID is reported in Canada. On February 11th, the World Health Organization named the disease caused by virus SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus disease 2019, or COVID-19. And none of us in North America were prepared for what would come next. On March 11th, the WHO declares COVID-19 a global pandemic, changing the course of history. On March 12th, Crohn's and Colitis Canada's COVID and IBD task force is formed, with the first webinar to the IBD community occurring on March 19th. On our first webinar, 250,000 individuals were diagnosed with COVID across the world, with 850 cases in Canada. And an international registry called the Secure IBD database records the first 21 cases of COVID in individuals with IBD. In April, for the first time in history, Canadians were in a lockdown. COVID was recognized as a lethal virus affecting the most vulnerable in our society. We watched healthcare systems collapse in Europe and in New York, and none of us knew what the future held. The sacrifices we made collectively in the spring of 2020 flattened the curve of COVID in Canada and prevented the scary projections from modelers. Our sacrifices also bought us time to prepare our healthcare systems for COVID, time to create tests, to study treatments, and ultimately to develop vaccines. As COVID declined in Canada in June, provinces reopened, but with the knowledge by protecting society through hand hygiene, physical distancing, and wearing masks. By the end of June, Crohn's and Colitis Canada completed 15 weekly webinars on the impact of COVID in IBD. At that time, over 8 million people were diagnosed with COVID across the world, over 100,000 in Canada, and over 1,500 patients with inflammatory bowel disease were reported in the Secure IBD registry. CCC's COVID IBD webinar series took a summer hiatus. We were in the valley following the first wave of COVID. Many of us connected with our loved ones. My kids played physically distanced baseball. I got a haircut, but we knew from other parts of the world that a second wave was looming in Canada. After 6 months, schools reopened in September, but they looked entirely different. And many kids with vulnerability stayed home to continue to learn online. By then, over 30 million people had COVID across the world, 140,000 in Canada, and over 2,300 with IBD. Throughout Canada, the second wave became apparent in October. To our worst fears, the number of cases in the fall was considerably higher than the first wave in the spring. but glimmers of hopes appeared as doctors were treating sick patients with dexamethasone and remdesivir, all the while waiting for news on the vaccines. And in November, 2 novel mRNA-based vaccines against COVID were announced with greater than 90% effectiveness. Today, on December 17th, 2020, 1 year since the first cases in China, we have daunting numbers in front of us. Over 74 million people have been diagnosed with COVID across the world, with nearly 500,000 in Canada alone. Over 3,800 people with IBD have tested positive for COVID. But we also have hope. The first Canadian was vaccinated for COVID-19 on December 14th, this past Monday. We can see that here on the video. The entire IBD community, along with the world, celebrated the announcements that vaccines protect against SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. Vaccines offer the potential to reduce the spread of COVID-19. For vulnerable populations, vaccines offer the potential to directly protect you from COVID-19. But the question remains, should an individual with IBD receive a vaccine for COVID-19? This question has been discussed by many different agencies. And I want to start by reviewing national guidance. Recommendations on the use of COVID-19 vaccines are made by the Public Health Agency of Canada, following the recommendations of the National Advisory Committee on Immunizations, called that group NACI. This Monday, December 14th, NACI released their recommendations regarding the use of COVID-19 vaccines in immunocompromised populations. They made 2 statements, and I'm just going to read them to you. The first one, NACI recommends that COVID-19 vaccines should not be offered to populations who are immunosuppressed due to disease or treatment, or those with an autoimmune disorder until further evidence is available. But then they followed up that statement with a second statement, which is as following. However, a complete series of COVID-19 vaccine may be offered to individuals in the authorized age group in this population if a risk assessment deems that the benefits outweigh the potential risk for the individual, and if informed consent includes discussion about the absence of evidence on the use of COVID-19 vaccine in this population. What I want to do is parse out these 2 statements to help you understand why these recommendations were made and what it means to you. First, I want to be clear. There is no data that a vaccine for COVID is specifically harmful to individuals with IBD. The rationale for their recommendations is based on lack of data in the IBD population. The randomized control studies of the COVID vaccines excluded individuals who are immunocompromised. Why did they exclude those with inflammatory bowel disease? Well, we know from prior studies of other vaccines that being on immune suppressing medications slightly lowers the immune response from a vaccine when compared to a healthy population. Essentially, the investigators did not want immune suppressive medications to interfere with the effectiveness of the vaccine. Typically, vaccines are studied in healthy populations first, and after approval, we do what's called post-marketing surveillance studies to understand if vaccines work differently in special groups like women who are pregnant, children, and immunocompromised populations. But this time is different. COVID-19 is a special case because the virus is potentially very harmful. And that's why NACI qualified their original recommendation by stating that each immunocompromised individual can work with their physician to conduct a risk-benefit analysis onto whether they receive the vaccine in the absence of direct evidence. So what does this mean for you living with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis? Well, it's a balance between the potential harm of being infected with COVID-19 against the uncertainty of receiving a vaccine in an understudied population. For those who are highly susceptible to dying from COVID-19, for example, a senior with IBD, or those who are highly exposed to the virus, for example, a healthcare worker or a teacher working in a school, then the potential protection of the vaccine greatly outweighs the uncertainty. However, for individuals who are otherwise lower at risk, for example, young and able to work from home, then waiting a few extra months for post-marketing surveillance studies in immunocompromised populations may be a reasonable approach, as long as you're taking great care to avoid infection. but this should ultimately be done as a personal decision made between you and your doctor. So what can you do while waiting for the vaccine? Well, we can now see the light at the end of the tunnel. This pandemic is not an endless abyss, but we know that several months are going to pass before everyone will have access to a vaccine. As well, some of you may choose to wait a bit longer to see the evolution of data in immunocompromised individuals. But there are several things that we can do as a bridge to vaccination. One, as long as you do not have an infection, stay on your medications. Flaring now increases your risk of worse outcomes from COVID-19. Number two, continue to follow all the public health rules to avoid being infected. And finally, encourage people around you who are healthy to be vaccinated. The difficult dilemma faced by immunocompromised populations is a lesson for the general healthy population. They must prioritize vaccination. If enough healthy individuals are vaccinated throughout society, then they create a human shield that protects individuals who cannot be vaccinated or who may mount a lower immune response when they are vaccinated. As each of us receives a vaccine, we can take solace that not only are we protecting ourselves, but we are also protecting vulnerable populations throughout society. And with that, I'm going to stop and invite my colleague, Dr. Benchmal, to join us, and I'll give the screen back to Sarah to get Eric's perspective on COVID vaccines and their impact on the getting this virus under control.
So thanks, Gil. I mean, obviously, I think this is a huge opportunity to get this virus under control, but it's not going to happen all of a sudden. And I want to present to you a little bit about why it's still important, that protection part of it, you know, using masks, staying home, and, you know, protecting yourself, why that's still important while the majority of people have not received the vaccine. So, Sarah, can I share my slides? Perfect. Just want to choose the right one. There we go. Okay, so you should be able to see my slides now. And, you know, so the question I have to answer, I don't know if you've asked it, but I think it's important to answer this question, is vaccine is coming, right? We're saved, everything's going to be fine. Why should I stay home at this point? Things are going to get better. I'm not too worried about getting sick. I'm otherwise healthy. Why should I stay home? And I think the New York Times said it very, very well, used this metaphor as the vaccine as a fire hose. And I think it's a really important way of thinking about this vaccine. It's kind of a strange instructions. We have a vaccine now, but stay home even more. That's the message that we're getting. So if we have vaccines now, why can't people go out? And that's something that we're going to talk about right now. So let's start with some definitions, a bit of a refresher. We reviewed some of these concepts back in the spring at the beginning of the pandemic, but I think it's really important to review it again. And the first thing I want to review is this idea of the R0 number, the basic reproductive number. This is the reproductive rate of a virus or infection. Essentially, it refers to how quickly a virus would replicate if we didn't do anything to prevent its spread. If the R0 is above 1, it means the virus is spreading exponentially. That means one person is infecting 2 people are infecting 4 people are infecting 8, and so on and so on. And that's what's called exponential growth. As you can see, SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that causes COVID-19, has an R0 similar to the 1918 flu pandemic between 2 and 3. The SARS-CoV-2 R0 is about 2.5. It's less highly infectious than a completely airborne virus like measles, with an R0 between 12 and 18. It's more infectious than the H1N1 flu was in 2009. And then let's talk about the effective reproductive number. We'll call that the RT, or the effective R0 is another way of thinking about it. This number represents how the R0 has been adjusted by all the methods that we're using to control spread, like physical distancing, wearing masks, and washing hands. So in essence, it represents how the virus is actually spreading. So the R0 does not change. That's just the characteristics of a virus. The RT, the effective reproductive number, changes based on everything that's happening in the world. And so what is the RT in Canada? This is as of December 13. Right now, the effective reproductive number in most provinces in Canada is somewhere between 0.95 and 1.10. So most provinces, I would say right now, have an RT just slightly above 1, meaning that there is exponential spread, but it's not as bad as it could be. What about in the United States? It's not all that different, but certainly it's higher than in Canada. Depending on the state that you're looking at, the effective reproductive number in the States is between 1.05 and kind of 1.25, much faster than the spread in Canada. So let's consider this concept of the vaccine as a fire hose. The more effective the vaccine is, the faster the population is vaccinated, the larger the water stream, right? The larger the hose, the more water you can spread on something. So let's say we have vaccines that are 90% effective, 95% effective. So we know what the stream is, and that doesn't change. The amount of water that you can spread on the fire doesn't really change. So if we're dealing with a campfire, an enclosed campfire inside some brick, clearly that's very well contained. It's not going to spread anywhere. And frankly, you probably don't even need a vaccine for that, because it'll go out on its own. And for most people, that's sort of like having the common cold, right? And that's an idea of an effective RT of much less than 1, because it's not going to spread to many people if you keep it contained, if you stay in the house, and so on. Then let's consider a house fire. A house fire in a set of townhouses, for example, like this, has an effective reproductive number of, let's say, between 1 and 2. That's an example, right? So it's going to spread. If you let it go, it's going to spread. However, most fire hoses can handle a house fire. You might need 2 or 3 fire hoses, but in general, it'll be able to handle a house fire. But then let's consider a large forest fire. And obviously that effective RT would be much greater than 2, because it will spread to the rest of the forest if left unchecked. And a single fire hose isn't going to do much to get that under control. So unfortunately, I couldn't find a firefighter with a frowny face, so I've pasted a frowny face on that, because obviously that firefighter is not very happy working alone. That hose, that vaccine, is not going to get that virus under control. So let's show this concept with everybody's favorite subject, mathematics. And this was a great paper that illustrated this concept really, really well. It's from the journal Health Affairs. And I just note that the senior author there, Rochelle Walensky, a physician from Harvard, who was actually just named as head of the CDC under the Biden administration. So she'll be taking over the CDC in the United States once Joe Biden becomes president in January. So obviously a very reputable physician and scientist who knows what she's talking about when it comes to COVID. So the COVID vaccines that are currently out seem to be both preventive, meaning they prevent you from getting infected, and also disease modifying, which means that if you get infected, the severity of the COVID-19 that you're going to get is going to be less. You're less likely to need a ventilator. You're less likely to die from COVID. So we'll pay attention on this graph to the composite type of vaccine, because that's what composite means. It means both preventative and disease modifying. Since our vaccine is around 90 to 95% effective at preventing COVID-19 infection, let's look at the higher part of these bar graphs. So the white shading, the lighter shading. This study used an upper limit of 75% effective for the vaccine. They did also do an analysis, prediction analysis in 90 to 95% effective vaccines, but it didn't look at the lower R0, RT values. So I'm going to focus just on the 75% value. So you can look at the full bar under the composite area. You can see, and I'm going to pull up my laser pointer here, you can see that the R0 is increasing as we go, right? And as the R0 or RT, sorry, effective R0 goes up from 1.2 to 1.5, the reduction in infection shown on the left, is not much different. It's actually a little bit higher if the RT is 1.5, but then drops very suddenly when the RT is 1.8, and then the RT is 2.1. So you can see that as the RT goes up, meaning there's more community spread of the virus, the vaccine doesn't work quite as well to reduce the number of infections, even though it's an effective vaccine. And this graph looks at the situation when your pace of vaccination is about 1%. which means it'll take 90 days to get 90% of coverage in the population. That's a bit optimistic since we're much slower at vaccinating people right now. So let's look at a different graph, which looks at a pace of 0.5%, 100 days to get 50% of the people vaccinated. So that's probably a bit more realistic where we're at in Canada right now. If again, you look at the composite over here, and you look at the full bar for 75% vaccine effectiveness, you can see that as the vaccine spreads more, you're getting much less effective reduction of infections, okay? So in this analysis, you would almost prefer, well, you would prefer a vaccine with 25% efficacy, so that's the dark blue bar here, and an RT of 1.2, and that's actually better than a vaccine with 75% effectiveness and an RT of 1.8, right? So you've got a less effective vaccine at 25%, but what really matters here is the spread of the virus. So the more community spread you have, the fewer infections you're going to prevent with a highly effective vaccine. This is another way to look at it. Red is bad because that means fewer infections were prevented with the vaccine. And this is in a case of where the vaccine is 50% effective, and we're looking at 30 days for the vaccine to take effect, and looking at the number of infections prevented over the course of 12 months. You can see that as the RT goes up, that's 1.2 to 1.5 to 1.6 to 1.8, there's more and more red. So you're preventing fewer and fewer infections. And that's for the same vaccine looked over a 12-month period. This emphasizes why we need to make sure to keep this effective R0, the RT value, lower as we vaccinate people. How we do this? By staying home, by not making contact with people outside of our homes, by wearing masks to prevent spread, and by washing hands, hand hygiene frequently. All of those messages that we've been sending you over the past few months. So we're not out of the woods yet. The vaccines are very, very good news. They will protect you even if you don't get the vaccine. If we get 70% of the population vaccinated, you will be protected. But we need to make sure to prevent the spread in advance and not just let go and do what we want, because the vaccine will not work if we do that. So with that, hold on, give me a second. I will introduce our first panelist and speaker who's going to talk a little bit about the vaccines in general, Dr. Jean-Éric Ghia, who is an associate professor in the Department of Immunology with a cross appointment in internal medicine, section of Gastroenterology at University of Manitoba. He obtained his PhD in neurosciences. He's worked all over the world, University of Strasbourg in France. He's worked at McMaster. He has done tons of stuff. I really can't get into everything that he's done so far, but I do want to say that he's also an expert in scientific popularization, so the communication of science, and has worked extensively with Radio-Canada on radio and TV. And on November 17th, he'll present, on November 17th, so it's past, sorry, I thought it was December 17th, but so he presented 100 different segments on communicating science and 6 short scientific TV documentaries as well. He also was appointed by the French and Canadian governments as Honorary Consul of France in Winnipeg, representing the French government under the umbrella of the General Consul in Toronto. So, Dr. Guia, I welcome you. You're a member of the task force, of course, and so you have participated in all of the things that we've been talking about so far. And I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about the development of these vaccines and the biology of these vaccines as well.
Thank you, Dr. Benchimol, for this brief and nice introduction. Yes, tonight we are going to talk about 101 vaccine. Let's figure out if this works. I'll try to move the slides. Yeah, this is my speaker disclaimer. And yeah, so let's jump in. What a vaccine is. So if we really want to understand how a vaccine against the COVID-19 and its virus, the SARS-CoV-2 works, first what we need to know is to know how actually our body fight off an infection. And it sounds complicated, but you will see it's pretty simple. So the first things that you need to know is that actually the SARS-CoV-2, it's a lazy vaccine. So what does it mean when I say like lazy vaccine? It means that it cannot multiply spontaneously. They need a host to do so, and that's why they need to invade an animal or a human, because at the end, the main goal, when they're gonna enter in our body, is to actually find a cell and use all the machinery that you can see on this cartoon, all the machinery and the supply that they can find on the cell, and to help them to multiply. And once they enter and start to multiply in the first cell, they will start actually to spread from cell to cell. And that's, you're going to see here the different type of cells that you have next to each other. And when there are going to be enough viruses, the viruses will start to do some damages to our body. And when that is going to begin, that's when it's going to be time to see external symptoms of the disease, like you're going to start to cough, you're going to start to have a running nose. But having said that, nature has been quite intelligent in allowing our bodies to actually develop a particular system to fight them. And this system is made up of many different cells that are part of what we call our immune system. And they are represented on this cartoon. As what you can see here and how you can represent this system, it's like a protective army. And this protective army, it's present in our blood and has a specific name. Maybe you already encountered this name. It's called the white blood cell. So in your blood, you have red cell, but you have also white blood cell. And those white blood cell, it's the army that you have to fight the different germs that can affect you. And like an army, as I say that, you will find different type of position. You will find different type of jobs in this army. And I will just focus on the three major ones. The first one is the two first ones that you can see on the top left is the guard and the spy. And the job of the guard and the spy is actually to catch and to show the invader to the soldiers that you have on the bottom of this cartoon. So the soldier at that time, they can start to study and can start to learn how to recognize and how to multiply themselves to fight the enemy. So who are the soldiers? We have two different types. We have several types, but I'm going to just focus on two different ones. The first one are the T lymphocyte cells who are going to attack the body cell infected by the virus. Remember what I told you at the beginning? The virus are lazy, they need a factory and they need, and if you send some soldier to shut down the factory, the viruses won't be able to multiply. And it's not only the only job that the T cell have. In addition to that, the T cell also communicate with a second type of soldier who are named B lymphocyte cells. You can see you have the two different types, the T and the B lymphocytes here. And when the B lymphocytes are going to be activated, what they're going to do, they're going to produce some antibody. And the antibody will directly attack the virus or the piece of the virus that you have in your blood. So if we now want to put everything together in one motion, is first you have the spy who are going to the virus, and then you will have the different soldiers, the different armies, the personage in your army who are going to start to study to find something that is highly specific to this virus. And they're going to show that to the B and the T cell, and they're going to teach them this is what you need to recognize to kill the virus. So when they're going to know that, what's going to happen, you're going to have a big fight. I'm not going to move on. I don't know. Yes. So all these things will lead to a big, dangerous battle that can take several days or weeks the first time a person is infected. Sometimes the outcome can be positive, and unfortunately, sometimes the outcome can be negative. But the most important thing that you have to keep in mind, and that's the most important information that you need to remember, is that after the infection, when the germs disappear, the immune system will remember what he learned about protecting the body from the virus. And to do so, he will create B and T memory soldiers that you can see here. And this is a third type of position who actually are so important in our system. Why? Because when they are in place, they will act very quickly if the body re-encounters the same virus again. So it's really like it's like our brain. They're gonna keep that in their mind, and next time when they're gonna see the same virus, they're gonna act super efficiently. Now, knowing all this thing, what about the vaccine? What is the purpose of the vaccine? So the purpose of the vaccine is to help our body to develop actually an effective immune reaction, and also the famous B and T memory cell, actually without developing the disease. So when the real virus will infect a person, the body will develop a very quick, rapid, effective immune response to fight the virus without getting really sick. So you have maybe heard that, maybe I went too fast. I don't know if I can go back, but anyway, the other slide was just to show you the different type of vaccines who are very close to be on the market. Yes, thank you. And roughly there is around 200, 250 different type of vaccine, but I will just focus on the couple who are really close to be on the market, who are on the market. So let's move on. So you have actually two different type of vaccine, and I will describe some of them only like here tonight, 4 different type. The first is that what you can see on the left side. They use a weakened or an inactivated version of a virus. The second are using only just a piece of the virus, and this is what you're gonna find out inside your shot. They are all harmless, and this technique has been used over like years, since 1776, when Dr. Jenner applied the first concept of the vaccination. And this is a material, as I said, that will be present inside the syringe. And if you remember the sequence of activation I just presented to you before, our system, what is going to do, our immune system, he will recognize them as an invader or a piece that actually don't belong to our body. Our system will create a T and B soldier antibody, but also the famous memory cell. And those memory cells will remember the invader. So if we are infected in the future with a real virus, the memory cell will recognize and fight it in a very fast and efficient way. Now, you have maybe heard like that, and maybe you're gonna be anxious also too, that there is a new different type of vaccine that actually came out on the market. And they are based not on a weakened or inactivated or portion of the vaccine, but they are based on the injection of the manufacturing instruction for the spike protein of the SARS-CoV-2 that you can see all around the virus here. So it's a manufacturing instruction to create this small spikes that you have around. And those spikes are really important because they are responsible for attaching the virus to the cell and let the virus enter into the cell. But usually what we have here, when the system actually, when you inject that and when the system realizes that this protein is a foreign protein, actually the system will create an immune response against it. But the manufacturing instruction is very fragile, and it needs to be protected during the injection. And to do so, researchers have developed different techniques, and the 2 most advanced options are what we call vector vaccines that you can see on the left side, and the mRNA vaccine on the right side. So just before we finish, I'm going to just explain you briefly how it works. For the vector vaccine, such the Russian Sputnik 5 vaccine, the idea is to bring the instruction plan inside our body through the use of a virus that actually cannot reproduce itself, but can still enter the cell and deliver the instruction. So once inside the muscle cell, usually you will receive the shot in your shoulder. Here, the instruction plan will give all the necessary information to make the spike protein. And in response, again, our body will start to make the T and the B cell, the antibody, and also the memory T and B cell that actually will remember how to fight this virus if the real virus is infecting you. And the last option, the second option, is the mRNA vaccine. But instead of, in that case, of using a weakened virus, an adenovirus, the instruction plan to make the spike are going to be placed in some kind of fat drop. You're gonna ask me why fat drop? It's because our cells are made with some fat. And that will allow the fat from the drop, when they're gonna meet the cell, to fuse, to mix together, and to bring the information inside the cell and to enter the cell. And what is going to happen again? Here, the instruction is going to be read by the cell. You're going to produce a different spike. The system will recognize the spike, and the immune system will be mounted, and you're going to create some memory and B cells that can actually play their role later on if your body is going to see for real the inflammation, the infection. So to summarize, this is exactly what I just talked about. You have on one side the scientists who are going to take a small piece or the instruction plan, put that everything in the syringe, inject that in your body. The cell, the spike, the guard are going to see this weakened version of the virus. They're going to teach to the different type of cell, and you can see they're going to study, they're going to study. You're going to have a light fight. That's why sometimes you have a light fever. But then the most important thing is that your body is going to create some memory cell who are going to be ready to fight the real viruses. So overall, it's really that's how you you can explain how the virus works. And all this different cartoon has been taken from two different issues from the Science Mag Junior, who was supported by Crohn and Colitis Canada here. The first version was released in May, and the second version, the second issue was just released 4 weeks ago. They are free to download. If you want to learn more, you can go and use that. I acted as a scientific director, so the slides that I just presented tonight were extracted from that. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Éric. Yeah, somebody always calls at the most inopportune time. That's the way it works, exactly. Right? All right. So I have some questions for you, but first I think we'll reintroduce Dr. Lisa Barrett. If Lisa, you want to turn on your webcam, that'd be great. So Dr. Barrett is a medical doctor and clinician scientist with expertise in infectious diseases and human immunology. She's leading a COVID-19 treatment and immunity study launched by this Nova Scotia Health Authority, which evaluates the effectiveness of treatments on patients hospitalized with COVID-19 to learn more about immunity. In addition to a PhD and an MD from Memorial and internal medicine residency at Dalhousie, she did an infectious disease fellowship at the University of Toronto, and she also did postdoctoral training at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases in Bethesda, Maryland, with Dr. Fauci, right? In Dr. Fauci's overall lab, I believe. Yes. So Dr. Barrett is a superstar, let's say. She worked with a superstar, but she's absolutely a superstar. And she's also a member of our task force. So thank you, Lisa, for joining us once again. And so first question for Jean-Éric. So we understand, how mRNA vaccines work. They're kind of a new technology. And I guess a common question that we keep hearing from the community is, were they rushed? Were they tested enough? And can they change our DNA?
So, to answer to that question, I have to say that researchers have been working and studying them for decades. So it's not something that it's coming down from the sky and suddenly we discover that suddenly in January. I would say like a lot of prototype of vaccine for example, Zika, Rady, or even the flu have actually used mRNA. So why so much attention now? I think it's because they can be really easily developed from materials that are present in the lab. I don't know if you have heard, but Moderna actually developed their mRNA vaccine in less than 48 hours. So it's not really the traditional technique that you can see on this presentation here on the cartoon here, where before the time of developing the vaccine in the lab, doing the lab testing, it was pretty long, actually pretty long. But here, like the timeline was super short, because as soon as we had all the information, as soon as all the scientists got the information about the SARS-CoV-2, who actually came in January, just researchers around the world started to try to design this mRNA instruction that I call like mRNA instruction plan for a cell to build the spike.
That's great. And in fact, I think from what I understand as well, that it can be manufactured much more quickly than the traditional vaccines, the traditional protein-based vaccines.
Exactly, and I think also why we went so fast is that because there is many pharmaceutical company, government, and also research, and even participants for the clinical trial who have really invested a significant amount of money, resource, time in really developing an effective COVID-19 vaccine.
Yeah, I actually think when we go forward in time and we look back at this year in history, this particular landmark discovery is going to be analogous to the Manhattan Project, where the collective world came together with a common cause, a common goal, and the minds and the monies from government and everything was put together to try to solve this. If somebody would have asked me in the spring if I thought a vaccine was going to be here at this webinar, I would have been like, and I was proven wrong, and that's something I'm ecstatic to be proven wrong.
And the other point I think worth mentioning is the money also helped facilitate the approval process. So typically vaccines take 4 to 5 years to get through Health Canada and the FDA. And it's not that it was less evaluated by Health Canada or the FDA, it was they put a lot more people on the case of evaluating the data. They got the data much earlier than they do it usually from the vaccine companies. So they were able to do all of their analyses well before we even heard that these vaccines were effective. And they were on the case and they acted very quickly. So it's not necessarily that the vaccine development or the approval was rushed. It was, this is what we can accomplish when we actually set our minds to achieving this goal. Lisa, do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, I agree entirely. Hello, everyone again. But I agree entirely with what you said. I mean, wow, as a science person, this makes me really excited because I see it as a pivotal point in how we might be able to do research and bring things to patients more quickly over time. The one piece of objectively not present information that is usually present when we approve a vaccine in particular is the time-based data. Usually approvers want extra months to know how durable the immune response, the immune readiness is with a particular vaccine, and they ask sometimes for out to 2 years. You can't have that if 2 years haven't passed. And again, that's not because this vaccine is not as good as some others, it's just that we haven't had enough time to get those data. They brought forward so we can, because of the risk to the world, and we'll get those data over time. And I think that's going to be important to inform the rest of our discussions as well. This is not this is not bad science. It's just we haven't had the time passed in order to get some of the pieces of information. And the second piece, to be clear, is that the data that we do have right now is that this vaccine actually prevents serious infection. We don't have all the data around how much prevention of infection from person to person. So that's just to be clear on what we know and what we don't know. The real information here is that this vaccine, thank goodness, is very good at preventing very serious disease and death, and that's really important.
And Lisa, that's actually a great segue into the question I wanted to ask you. And just before I ask you, I just want to give the audience a bit of context of Lisa's background. So she's an infectious disease specialist that joined our task force back in March and has been with us every week giving the guidance, the amazing advice that you hear on this webinar and the ones before. We've had that privilege of listening to that advice, including when the vaccine recommendations from NACI came out. Lisa, even though she was on call, it was a Sunday, she took time off of everything and met with us to talk about the implications of of these recommendations for the IBD population. And the question I asked you on last Sunday, and I want to ask you again in front of the audience is, should someone with IBD receive a vaccine for COVID-19?
And thankfully, you folks have done the hard work of going through the guidelines of what's recommended in the country already. So thank you for doing that. So I'm going to divide the question up a little bit, and I'll ask the first part. I'll answer the first part, which is, should someone with IBD get the vaccine? And the answer is absolutely. The question will be, what's the timing, and when exactly is the best time for each person to get it? And so, as we know, that a vaccine goes through animal trials, it comes up through small numbers of people getting it to make sure it's safe. We find a good dose, then we go to slightly more people, make sure it's safe, safe, safe. Then we go to the 30, 40, 50,000 person version, which is a phase 3 trial. And as you mentioned, after that phase 3, if things look safe and that there's effectiveness, that the immune system is all primed, efficient, and ready to roll, then it gets approval and we go forward and we get post-marketing data. And often, not everyone is included in the clinical trials. And so that's important right here, right now. As you mentioned, the NACI guidelines state that people who are immunocompromised, autoimmune disease, pregnant or lactating women may want to have a very, very careful conversation with their provider, including somebody who knows something about vaccines, preferably as well, to say, is this the right time for me to get the vaccine? And a couple of things there. It depends on what your risk is as an individual person. And it also depends on what you do, for a living. It also depends, what do you think is going to change if you get the vaccine now versus in 3 months? And so you mentioned some things throughout your presentations where you said nothing is going to change when you get the vaccine right away. And I think it's really important for us to remember that when you get this vaccine, your hand washing, distancing, stay at home is not going to change for quite some time until we get a lot of people vaccinated. So that's a lot of words. I said a lot of stuff. The take home message is, it's going to depend a little bit on what your risk threshold is as a person, both intrinsically because of what you do for a living or who you live with, but also if you would prefer to wait to get a little bit more information or not. But the take home message is, it's likely not a safety problem altogether. We just don't have those data yet. And so it's an informed decision-making process. And I would much rather say it depends on the timing and everyone should get vaccinated than to say yes or no to the original question.
And I do want to say that there will be more information coming. So you may ask yourself, if IBD patients in Canada cannot get the vaccine because we're immunocompromised, how are we going to know whether the vaccine is safe or effective in IBD patients? The reality of the situation is that we learned this week that IBD patients in the UK are getting the vaccine. IBD patients in the US are getting the vaccine. And so we will have what we call post-marketing surveillance data, meaning after approval, we're going to monitor to see what happens to these people. We will have information on whether they can develop immunity on these medicines like Remicade, infliximab, all of the biologic medicines and so on. And we will have information about whether it's safe. Hopefully we'll have information about whether it might flare up your IBD. It doesn't seem like it should, but all of those things. I think, a follow-up question for either Lisa or Jean-Éric, whichever you prefer. There was a question about cancer, and is the vaccine for patients, is the vaccine safe for people with cancer and those on immunotherapy?
Jean-Éric, do you want to start?
Sorry. So I no idea for me on that. I will pass the question. I want to be sure.
Yeah, so right now there definitely were exclusion criteria to keep people with serious other comorbidities, meaning serious medical problems, out of the trials that are done first. That's not uncommon. Some people do get in who develop cancer while they're on the trial, but there certainly wasn't a plan to include those people. So we don't know yet if people with cancers are going to respond the same. However, it's the same idea. However, it depends on your risk of running into COVID-19 and your ability to maintain for a while longer, home hand washing, distance masking. So really, it's got to come down to what your individual risk is, and hopefully provinces make decisions that allow that informed decision-making process if they can. I know there's been other conversations in other provinces, if there's not enough vaccine and there are high-risk people to get vaccinated, but it's worth a conversation with your health provider.
Yeah, and I read a paper last week actually in a cancer journal that raised some concerns about this type of vaccine in solid tumor cancer patients, in that the tumor may actually bring in the fat layer around it more easily, and we don't know what that would do. I mean, I think the bottom line is we're just not sure if a tumor brings in that stuff. We're just not sure. So.
I wouldn't hold on to that one too long, because the amount of fat we're injecting here, is less than I've gained over COVID, that's for sure. I mean, it's a wee tiny amount of fat compared to a solid tumor. So I don't know that I'm that fussed about that idea, but certainly the point is we don't know. And you might want to hang, because you're going to have to hang out and do nothing for a while longer anyway. I got bad news for you. It's the stay home plan.
Yeah, and the one thing to think about, and I think about this all the time in the year, is not only is this a brand new virus, it's a brand new disease. And just think about everything we have learned in the past year is unbelievable. I always kind of think about in the 1980s, HIV came, and then AIDS, the disease. And it took us years to understand all the different facets to develop antiviral treatments. We've yet to develop a vaccine for it. It was a very complicated virus, and it's one that really revolutionized our healthcare system. This is the same kind of impact. It's just in a year. And so we have to give the time to learn, and we have to appreciate that some of the information that we give you 6 months from now may be different from what we gave you a month ago. But the key thing is vaccines are rolling out, like Eric said, not only into the general population, but in IBD patients. And every month that goes by, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of more people will be vaccinated. That information will come back to the scientific and clinical community. We'll synthesize that, and if we see anything new, we're coming back to you and talking to you about it. And in the meantime, I think I just want to stress what Lisa said. This is your opportunity to have that conversation with your physician. And probably the people who need to prioritize those conversations are ones who are at the highest risk and therefore at the highest likelihood of being offered a vaccine over the next month. If you're elderly, if you're a frontline healthcare worker, and my patients, and I think some of them are actually on, if they're asking me that, if you're in a frontline position and you have a high risk of exposure, I'm going to recommend that you get the vaccine, because I do believe the benefit of preventing COVID is greater than the uncertainty that we're all discussing right now. But if you're young, you're able to hold off, you're not going to get the vaccine anyways in January, something like that, definitely let's find out what the new information is. And as we're talking about safety, maybe Lisa, I can pivot back to you and ask you just to give us a sense of what are the safety signals for the COVID, just in the general population, and anything that people should be worrying about, not only just in the clinical trials, but people have also talked about allergies that have happened since the vaccination's gone by. And if you could give us kind of a sense of what we should be considering when we get vaccinated.
Yeah, so just before too, I think it's important to think of where you are in the world. If you live in my old hometown of Old Perlican, Newfoundland, and there's 700 people that have seen for 200 miles around them no cases of COVID, and you're planning on staying there, you might want to hang out for just another couple of months until we get a little bit more data. So it is very situational and dependent on where you are, compared with downtown Toronto maybe. That might be a bit more, in your frontline worker there. But so back to what are so this is just like any other vaccine. So I love the way Honorary put up the pictures of the different types of vaccines and their outputs. This shouldn't be that much different overall, although again, it's a relatively new platform for vaccines in humans. But the same idea is when you take any medication or any vaccine, you divide the reactions up into things that happen at the site of injection, so reactivity to the actual vaccine itself, the short-term effects as well as the longer-term effects, and then allergic reactions, because allergic reactions can happen with any medication, drug, or vaccine. So yes, there have been a couple of cases that were described as allergies. Both of them now, given the case reports, I'm pretty convinced at least one of them was quite a severe anaphylactic response. So that's a true anaphylactic response that requires your EpiPen going in there and fixing things, and one other that was slightly less severe. Is that expected with the number of people that have been vaccinated so far? Probably. And that is not an unexpected rate of allergic reaction so far. But certainly in people who have a vast history of allergy, we're saying hold the bus for a month or two until we sort this out a little more and we see if this is a true signal or not. So that's anaphylactic or allergic responses. The day you get your shot, I love this about it. It gives you a bit of reactiveness at the site of the actual vaccine because your body is responding and your immune system's getting ramped up. And I love it. I mean, all us immunologists are like, score, your arm really hurts. I'm so happy. It's great. But truly you do, and you do get a bit more of a systemic feeling in many people. Between 10-20% of people feel kind of crappy for a day or two. That's not unexpected. That is not getting COVID. That is the good response you want from the vaccine. And then there are the slightly longer term things, and there hasn't been a signal there so far with longer term problems. Overactive immune responses we have not seen yet, but may happen. And in the case of autoimmune diseases, that was part of the reason why, until there's more data and people are included, they haven't been included in these trials so far. But no autoimmune reactions so far that have been defined in the first number of people that have gotten this vaccine. So those are the things we look for: short, medium, and long term, plus allergy. So far, if you've got a history of allergy, hang off, wait a couple of months, see how it goes.
Yeah, and I think you've got to also consider the short and long-term risk of COVID. The short-term risk we've talked about considerably on these webinar series, and everyone knows the impact of the risk of going to hospital, ICU, and dying from the disease. But we're also starting to learn that some people who get COVID have what we call these long haul symptoms, symptoms that the virus is long gone, and either because they've had some damage related to the virus because they were very sick, or some unusual immunological effects that have occurred post vaccine. And people now are literally creating new areas of medicine, trying to understand why this happens, who it happens, what's going to happen. So again, whenever we talk about risk, whether it's starting a drug, getting a vaccine, it's always a balance against the risk of what you're being protected against. The other thing, and maybe I'll answer it as the adult gastroenterologist on the panel, is people have also asked, what is the potential risk of flaring your inflammatory bowel disease if you get vaccinated? And again, kind of like a broken record, new disease, new vaccine, the data is sparse. It hasn't been studied in patients with IBD, to date, so I can't tell you exactly what happens with this particular vaccine. But we can look at other vaccines and extrapolate information from there. And there actually has been a lot of vaccine studies that have looked at the risk of flaring after you've been vaccinated, particularly in people who have inflammatory bowel disease and those who are immunocompromised on different drugs, like different biologics. Probably the most recent data comes from our Shingrix vaccine. And there's been several well-designed studies that have not shown that when you get a Shingrix vaccine, you're more likely to get a flare of IBD. So it's a vaccine that I prescribe quite commonly in my IBD population. So I suspect that that's going to be the case as well with this one. Of course, we're gonna see these data as time unfolds in 2021.
There was a question in the chat box. I'm having technical issues, so I'm hoping everybody can hear me. Question in the chat box, probably Lisa, as a pediatric infectious disease person, you're probably best suited to answer, is what about children? Are children going to get the vaccine? They're obviously at risk of spreading it in schools and so on. Do they qualify for the vaccine?
So I do adults.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why I thought that.
And I don't own any small people either. But I can tell you that there are ongoing studies right now to include people who are younger and children down to 12, and then there will be another cohort that will go further down in age. Right now, those data don't exist, so it's 16 for the vaccine approval, but very rapidly cycling through, very similarly to the way immunocompromised people will be included. People want to get people included in these studies very soon, and children are coming next. So for the moment, kids aren't getting this vaccine, but good news, at least the very young children seem to have lower rates of symptomatic disease. And also, if we're being good family units around them, we'll keep them safe by keeping our activities safe and maintaining all the things we know are proven to prevent disease so far. So keep going on the keeping going for another couple of months with kids.
And Lisa, I suspect the answer will be somewhat similar, but we have had questions about pregnancy. And pregnancy, of course, depending on where you are, if you wait a bit, you won't be pregnant, but you might be very early in the pregnancy too. And I realize that we don't have data specifically, but just for women who are pregnant, what do you say?
Yeah, so the NACI guidance is very much the same. Those folks weren't included deliberately in the trials. Some people became pregnant on the trial, and those folks didn't seem to have any adverse event, but they were not deliberately included, and therefore we do have to get more information. If you're somebody who's in a very high-risk situation that you feel you're going to be exposed to COVID, have a very serious conversation with your health provider and someone who knows something about COVID or vaccines, and make a decision that way. Sometimes things aren't modifiable and it might be worth it to you. Very much a risk-benefit kind of scenario.
So a question for anybody who wants to answer really, are these vaccines going to be mandatory? And what happens if people refuse the vaccines?
I think they are definitely not going to be mandatory. That's obvious, and people will have the choice to make their own decision. And what we talk about tonight, it's really to balance the benefits and the risk regarding the vaccination, but also the disease, if they are facing a disease, if they are like something like that. But definitely no, yeah, I cannot see a government saying like, yeah, let's go and vaccinate everybody. I don't know, Lisa, maybe?
It's there's a very fulsome discussion happening, but we're Canada, right? We don't require anything. We make great suggestions, and we have a very engaged Canadian group for the most part. Canadians are pretty engaged and want to do the right thing a good chunk of the time. It may be there's some talk among individual groups or organizations, especially while we're still trying to get control of this, not governmental agencies, but private agencies that may say, well, if you want to come and do this with us in a small space, then you may have to be vaccinated, but certainly not at a governmental policy level. I will say though, as much as I've been talking about how there's no data and you might want to consider waiting a little bit to get the vaccine, if you're immunocompromised or have some other issues in that list, I'm very pro-vaccine and very pro-vaccine for COVID-19 and very COVID vaccine pro for the one that's just become available. So I do not have reservations about this. And I hope that after a year of this, people really do recognize that a vaccine is our next way out. And I hope there's a great uptake across Canada.
And the one thing I would add is, I think, speaking for the IBD community, the people I've spoken to over the course of the past 9 months, there's been a tremendous amount of stress, anxiety, sacrifice. And I think one of the feelings is this sense of helplessness, like not being able to have any control, not being able to do anything. And I realize that sense of helplessness may be going on a little bit longer, but the people around you, your family, your friends, your coworkers, the people who are not in your situation, who are healthy, who there's no issues with you getting a vaccine, this is how you take control, and this is how you help your friend, your family member, your child. And this is only going to work if we have large parts of the population being vaccinated. And I think, Eric, when you did the presentation around the fire hose analogy, it really just hammered home the concept that we have to vaccinate as a society. And we recognize that some people are going to have to wait. Some people aren't going to mount the same immune response as others. And some people, like Lisa said, has an allergy and may not even be able to get a vaccine. The only way to protect everybody is if the large proportion of the population gets vaccinated.
And this is my final little bit on this. Please don't feel pressured. If you really do feel like you want to wait for those 3 months or whatever of data in this particular setting, don't feel the pressure for the first 3 months. Only feel it after you get some data.
So I think we should start to stop sort of and summarize, because I think people are asking us to summarize what we're recommending. And I think, you know, to summarize what I'm hearing from everybody here is we're very excited. We're very happy that these vaccines are out. We're happy that there's more vaccines coming. The reality of the situation is that people with IBD, especially those who are immunocompromised on medications like the immunomodulators, the biologics, likely will not be in the first group to get the vaccine until we get more data and a better understanding of how the vaccine works and its safety in that population. You know, the questions as far as do we need to stop the medication to get the vaccine? No. Our strong recommendation is keep your disease under control as the #1 priority, because there are data out there that say that if you are needing steroids to control a flare, you're at risk for severe COVID-19. In fact, there's data coming that seems to imply even when you don't take steroids, having moderate to severe inflammation, disease activity with IBD may put you at risk for severe COVID-19 as well. So the #1 most important thing is to keep on your medications and keep things under control. If you want the vaccine, if you're a frontline worker, teacher, healthcare worker, grocery store clerk, speak to your physician once the vaccines are available in, you know, your family doctor's offices, and they will be at some point. Once they are, have a conversation with your physician to see whether it would be appropriate and safe for you to get the vaccine, understand the risks and the benefits. And hopefully by that time, we'll have data from other countries. We'll have information to say one way or the other whether it's safe. Did I summarize that well? Did anybody have anything to add? Excellent. So with that, I think I want to thank Jean-Éric, Dr. Ghia, and Dr. Barrett, who is not a pediatric infectious disease. I don't know why I said that. I'm having a rough day. Thank you so much for joining us once again. I'm sure you will be back. Judging by the number of people on this webinar and the interest and the questions, I suspect that we'll have to be back. I think it's worth mentioning, Gil, if you don't mind, tomorrow, the International Organization for the Study of IBD is meeting to discuss vaccinations in IBD. And that will come with, you can go ahead, that will come with recommendations, right, Gil?
Yeah, so the IOIBD is a group of IBD specialists from across the world. So they have representation from countries, virtually every country in the world. I've been a privilege to be a member of IOIBD, and we've had a task force specifically around trying to understand the risk of vaccination in our IBD populations and our recommendations. We actually did a very similar panel discussion and recommendations back in March. And again, it was the same situation. We had very little data of the impact of COVID on the IBD population. We extrapolated from our knowledge and from other viruses. And in fact, many of the recommendations that we actually made in March were then kind of proven to be correct in the Secure IBD Registry and other studies. And so we're doing that same process tomorrow morning. I have to wake up at 6 in the morning. That's okay. And then we're going to have recommendations that should be published in January.
And so we'll certainly come back to you as a community, you know, hopefully in January, and we'll review and see what changes. I mean, I think the reality is those recommendations are not necessarily based on data. They're based on the biology and our understanding of the science and so on. And so it may or may not influence governments in terms of giving this vaccine, but I'm sure you will want to know about it. So we'll certainly be back and discuss that with you, hopefully in January, or it will be on our webpage. We'll link to it certainly on the crohnsandcolitis.ca/COVID-19 for more information there. So with that, we're going to take a 5-minute break, let people use the washroom, let people get a drink, and we will be back, or they will be back. So Sandra Zielinski, who's a patient who's on our COVID-19 task force, is going to lead a fun conversation about staying home for the holidays.
And I think, well, Eric and I are going to be stepping back. You don't want us on the holiday special. I think we both want to wish everyone from the IBD community happy holidays, a happy new year. We're going to see you again in January. We are going to walk you through, not through the pandemic, but also through the vaccination. We've been here quite often throughout the 2020, and I don't think we're going anywhere in 2021. So we'll see you in the new year.
Hopefully we're going outside in 2021, but we'll see how things go. Take care, everybody.
Hi, everyone. So sorry. Just a second here. You should hear me now. Sorry about that. I usually call in with my audio, so I have stable audio. So I apologize if there's any little bit of delays. Thank you so much for holding on the line for the Home for the Holiday portion of this webinar. It's great to have you all here. Apologies for the delay. So we're really excited to be here today to sort of have a bit more of an informal chat with everyone. As a fellow IBDer, I'm really excited to be here with all of you, and we'll be joined with some other fantastic IBDers to have some discussions about the holidays. We have a few fun things planned, and hopefully you'll join us in the chat box and we can have some discussions together. So I'm going to start off by introducing myself, and I would like to invite the other panelists to join as well, who will introduce themselves. My name is Sandra Zielinski. I have been living with Crohn's disease for about 28 years now. I was diagnosed when I was 19 years old, and have been working actually in patient engagement, patient-oriented research for about the past 8 years. It's a pleasure to be here. I would also just quickly make one mention and thank Crohn's Colitis Canada for having us here, for also putting together the task force, and two co-chairs, Dr. Kaplan and Benjamin, for really leading the task force and providing us with all this wonderful information that is so important for our community. So I would like to pass the baton over to Dr. Noelle Rohatinsky. We all have, or a few of us on the line have the skis at the end of our name, but Noelle, I'll pass the baton over to you.
That's so true, Sandra. I didn't even notice that. Yeah, hi, everyone. I'm Noelle Rohatinsky, and I'm a registered nurse and associate professor at the College of Nursing at the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon. And I do IBD research, and my interests are in promoting access to IBD health services and evaluating the experience of individuals with IBD, as well as their family caregivers and healthcare practitioners. I've been living with IBD for over 20 years, and I've been volunteering with Crohn's and Colitis Canada for since 2011. So it's been a while. So I'm very excited to be here tonight. I think we want to make this fun and engaging, so we hope that you'll participate. So yes, hi everyone.
Did I go? I'll go next. Yeah. Hi, I'm Rory. My name is Rory Hornstein. I've had IBD for 35 years. So I was diagnosed in 1986. I am a registered dietitian in private practice, and I specialize in GI and IBD and functional gut disorders. And I've been involved with Crohn's and colitis for many years, beginning as a kid in the basement of certain hospitals in Winnipeg and all the way up till now. So it's a pleasure to be here tonight.
Okay, and I'm Peter. Can you nod if you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Great. So I've had IBD since I was about 15 years old. So it's been about 15 years of living with the disease. It's been mostly stable, so I'm extremely grateful for that. I recently moved from Vancouver, where I recently finished my master's studying IBD, in order to move out here to Ottawa, where I started a PhD. And my project is looking at novel therapies to modulate the microbiome in pediatric inflammatory bowel disease. So hopefully I can help find some new treatments potentially for IBD. And yeah, it's awesome to be here with all of you and for everyone else in the IBD community joining us.
Thanks, guys. And I think I got my audio sorted out. So sorry for abandoning you with the introductions. So we're going to start off the session with a poll to the audience. And Sarah, can you post and launch the poll for us for our first question? You gotta love your sweater, Peter, from the audience, by the way. So first poll question, what is your silver lining for 2020? Please select all that apply. So friends and family, spending time outside in nature, better work-life balance, practicing mindfulness and slowing down, or going to virtual online healthcare services and support. We'll just take a few moments while people answer the poll. Well, it looks like we have definitely friends and family. I would agree. Spending more time out in nature. I heard that a lot of camping gear and RVs and boats were selling like hotcakes this year, so that makes sense. Better work-life balance. Perhaps people were able to have a little bit of working from home from this 2020 year. And hopefully we can continue some of that work-life balance going into 2021. So yeah, we have 72% of people that answered friends and family, and then 61% that spoke about spending more time outside in nature. So those are positive things. Great. Okay, so we also have just a question I'm going to ask to the audience to think about while we do our next exercise, which should be a little entertaining. We'll see how it goes. But if you could answer in the chat box, what is one of your key takeaways for 2020? And if you'd like to sort of start adding your comments in the chat box, we're going to do 12 days, or sorry, not 12 days of Christmas, a 12 months of 2020 kind of recap. So Dr. Kaplan earlier on at the very beginning of the first webinar did 2020 recap. Ours is going to sound a little different. But yeah, if you could write one of your key takeaways from 2020, we would love to read some of those out and share with the whole audience. And I'm going to start off the 12 months of 2020 that the four of us have compiled and put together. So we've sort of split up the months of what it individually looked like, and tried to put a spin on the 12 days of Christmas. So we'll see how this goes. Okay.
Sandra, you promised us that we didn't have to sing, remember? So we are not singing tonight for you all because we didn't test it out, but we all are terrible singers, self-proclaimed terrible singers. So
I am a terrible singer as well, but I do feel an urge to add a little intonation. So I'll try my best. It's probably not going to work out very well. So here we go. In the first month of 2020, the world sent to me one flight to Austin, Texas for Crohn's and Colitis Congress, and no COVID for me.
Okay, that was singing. Okay. In the second month of 2020, the world sent to me a 2-day IBD conference in Vienna with 7,000 attendees. Seems crazy. And no COVID for me.
In the third month of 2020, the world sent to me 3 months of lockdown with no visits with my parents and no COVID for me.
In the fourth month of 2020, the world sent to me 4 days of binge watching Tiger King and no COVID for me.
In the fifth month of 2020, the world sent to me 5 canceled trips and no COVID for me.
In the 6th month of 2020, the world sent to me 6 zucchini plants in my garden and no COVID for me.
In the 7th month of 2020, the world sent to me a 7-day canoe trip on the Athabasca River and no COVID for me.
In the 8th month of 2020, the world sent to me 8 tacos at Mare Blue Bog for a socially distant picnic with my lab mates and no COVID for me.
In the 9th month of 2020, the world sent to me 9 vials of blood with an IV iron infusion and no COVID for me.
In the 10th month of 2020, the world sent to me 10 virtual meetings per day and no COVID for me.
In the 11th month of 2020, the world sent to me 11 days of isolation from an outbreak at my son's high school, but no COVID for me.
And in the 12th month of 2020, the world sent to me 12 times 3 biopsies during a colonoscopy with no inflammation or COVID for me.
So good news, we're on the no COVID list. Yay! And I hope all of you listening are also on the no COVID list. So I would like to read out just a couple of key takeaways from the audience. So my takeaway is to stand up and self-advocate because no one else will do it for me. Anything can happen. I think that's a really good learning that, so much is out of our control. Anything can happen at any time for all of us. I also want to just say that I think as a community, we have a resilience from living with IBD, and I also sense that my feeling towards that is also that, from living with IBD and knowing what it's like to go through tough times, perhaps as a community, easier for us to, follow the social distancing rules and wash our hands and not want to get sick and also protect others that might be vulnerable. Take nothing for granted. That we could have virtual meetings and people can join from all over, and you can literally have a meeting with anyone from anywhere. Just breathe. That's a really good one. And so I just want to really quickly say that we'll compile all these comments. So please feel free to keep commenting, and we'll put together a document that we can put on CCC. I know that we have to be mindful of time because the last session ran a little over time, so we're going to move on, but please keep adding your comments. We'll put them together and we'll create a document and we'll share it online for other IBDers to access as well. So the next part of this session is we were just going to talk a little bit about some ideas for the 2020 holiday season. So we'll start off by launching our second poll to the audience. And again, we'll encourage your questions and comments into the chat box, which we can compile and share with other IBDers on the CCC website. So the next poll is, what is your silver lining for this year's holiday season? Not having to shop in busy malls and less stress, saving money, less indulgence in food and drink, or there is no silver lining? Is it 2021 yet? And while you guys are doing that, I can read out a couple other ones. I just see a comment at the bottom saying, never underestimate the comfort of a cat. I have 2 cats myself. I know Noelle has a cat. My cat was actually sitting in my lap just before the webinar started. I absolutely agree. They can be therapeutic and entertaining and company and so many other things. Pets are amazing. Reaching out to others for support in an online environment goes a long way. And that is important to value good health because it's not always guaranteed. Absolutely. People have been so creative and supportive of each other. yeah, we'll get into some of those ideas for the holidays as well, because I think we're all having to be more creative this year during the holidays, as many of our family members are virtual. Okay, so or away, like we're not able to, they're not virtual, but we'll have to meet them virtually. Okay, so silver lining, 59% not having to go to the malls, less stress. Yeah, I agree, especially during COVID. Saving money, 30%. There is no silver lining. Let's get on with it and move to 2021, please. That's 35% of you. And then 19% of less indulgence in food and drink. Thanks for taking the poll. Please feel free to add any more comments in regards to that piece. So the next question that we would like you to add some comments about are, what holiday traditions will you be keeping? What will you miss the most? What changes are you looking forward to this year? And do you have any tips or tricks to make this holiday season memorable and stay well? Feel free to add your comments to the chat box. And then in the meantime, the four of us are going to have a little round table discussion about what our holiday season is going to look like this year. So I'll kick it off. This isn't to sound like bah humbug, but I literally am not kind of doing Christmas. I'll probably end up talking to some family over Zoom, but I haven't really decorated. I don't have kids, I'll just say that too. And so my husband and I have decided to plan something completely different this year. We are planning on going, I live in rural British Columbia. There's a lot of lakes in our area, so we're planning on going ice fishing on Christmas Day, packing up our camp stove, our tent, our heater, breakfast, and we're going to cook breakfast out in the lake, hang out, hopefully catch some fish, maybe cook lunch if we have fish, and that's going to be our Christmas Day. And then maybe a little bit of phone calling and Zoom and some of those types of activities with family members as well. So I'll pass the baton over to you, Peter. What's your Christmas going to look like this year?
Sure, yeah. So the title of the session, I think, is Home for the Holidays. And I will not be home. I'll be at my home away from home out here in Ottawa. So because of that, I'll be, I guess, Zooming with my family, hopefully for most of Christmas. So actually to ask the audience, everyone that's joining us, if you have any ideas for fun activities that are sort of family friendly for the young kids and more older family members, I would be really thankful if you could share some. But in terms of traditions, hopefully nothing really becomes a tradition. I hope next year is a little bit more back to normal.
Just a quick question. Have you guys planned a special Zoom or just like get together in Zoom and just chat and hang out? Or do you have like a special party or some kind of activity planned via Zoom?
Nothing figured out yet. I was talking to my parents. We have some games that we might be able to put together, but nothing solid yet.
Great. Rory, would you like to go next? How are you celebrating this holiday season?
We're celebrating Hanukkah, so tonight is actually the 8th and final night. We've done a couple of Zoom lighting of the candles together with our family, which has actually given us an extra opportunity because we don't usually go to Winnipeg in the middle of December. We've only done that a couple of times. So it's been great to be able to see little cousins and have all the younger generation and the older generation get together, all the way from New York to Winnipeg and Calgary and Toronto. So it's been good, but we've done everything virtual, and it's been a good week.
And Noelle.
Yes, I think it'll be quiet for us. I don't work shift work now, but when I did, I always used to volunteer to work Christmas, just because we don't have children. So, you know, and my family all live in BC, and of course I'm in Saskatchewan. So we're in Saskatchewan. So we're really it's gonna be a quiet Christmas for us as well. I think my husband works nights, Christmas night, so we will just, you know, take take it easy during the day. Sleep in if we can. Maybe go for a drive. I have some ideas later on where we'll talk about some tips for what you can do safely, and so I'll talk about what we're going to do. But connecting through technology, it's been amazing, and I think we're seeing some common themes within the audience about connecting virtually with family and friends. I mean, I'm connecting with family and friends who I haven't connected with in years on a regular basis, and now we are connecting. We're making a concerted effort to connect. So I think that's one of the positives that have come out of this holiday season and this pandemic, is maybe making more of a conscious decision to connect. So I don't know if it's like that for all of you online, but I'm seeing lots in the chat about people who are doing that.
Yeah, and I think many of us, like as Canadians, have family members spread in various provinces. So it's kind of a unique opportunity to actually bring people together in that virtual space from, Manitoba, Ontario, BC, wherever your family members are from. So yeah, to Noelle's comment, I'll just read out some really great tips actually coming from this. It looks like people are planning some great things already. And they're coming in fast and furious, so I'm trying to keep up here. But we have somebody planning a Secret Santa Uber Eats. Is a fun activity. Draw names using an app and order a mystery meal for that person. Zoom while you eat. Like, how fun would that be? Sounds awesome. And then checking in with family and friends via Facebook. Some people mentioned, or somebody mentioned, reading stories over online to some of the younger family members. We'll continue to decorate and do some baking. I'll miss my husband and daughter who are in St. John's. My son and I are planning to build Star Wars Lego, which is stored in 5 large Rubbermaid bins. We'll do connect with family around the world. Nice. We have, social distance bonfire, respecting gathering guidelines for your area. Yep. So outside, and you can spread out. Let me see. It's moving. Pictionary and Monopoly work pretty well over video calls. Yeah, and there's other, I think, games. I've written a couple of ideas down that I've sort of searched online. One called Blast from the Past, where you get all your family members to pull out pictures from previous Christmases or whatever pictures, and then you can take turns sharing using the screen share function, and different family members can share some of those pictures that they've pulled from past memories. Another one was, and I think somebody else mentioned it too. Well, I think someone said I'm staying in pajamas all day because there's no sense in getting dressed up. So you could have a pajama party with the family, and even do gift opening if you do gifts remotely, and celebrating with everyone, taking turns opening gifts in your own home. What else did I have here for ideas? There's a few really good ones actually. So the baking together, somebody mentioned that as well. Group trivia. I think Trivial Pursuit could be quite easily done online. Ugly Sweater Christmas party. Virtual Christmas concert. I know all of you loved my, half singing. So some of you might be better singers and have a Christmas party. So what are we at?
Sorry to interrupt, Sandra. I just want to clarify for our audience members that please post your questions in the question box. We keep saying chat box because that's what we're using, but it's through the question box that you would want to submit your questions or comments as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sorry, I actually didn't even realize the distinction looking at it. So yeah, thank you. Oh goodness. So we'll compile all of these because there's so many great ideas coming in, so we can share that with the broader community. just before we move on, perhaps we can talk about what, from the group, what tradition, oh, sorry about that. Actually, yeah, we'll move on to the last section. We have 10 minutes left. So if we can launch the third poll, and we'll talk a little bit about looking forward to 2020. So what are you looking forward to most in 2021? Sorry, looking forward to 2021. Please select all that apply. So traveling, I hope that might be on the radar. Hugging, going back to work, like in person, if you're not already doing that. I know some people already have to go to work in person, depending on your job. Entertainment, so going to the movies, out for dinner, friends, etc., or going back to the gym. So I have another, I'll just read a few more while you guys are doing the polls. Somebody mentioned at Thanksgiving, we sent all the cousins bingo cards and had grandma be the caller, and we had a big family bingo game via Zoom. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. My sister-in-law, she recently, just about a week ago, kind of did a Christmas or a cookie decorating contest. So she had her family, they live in Ontario, decorate gingerbread men cookies and then sweater cookies, and then she numbered them all, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the sweater cookies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the gingerbread cookies, and then texted the picture to everyone to vote. So all the family members got the pictures, and we all voted on which one was our favorite, and then somebody won a prize. So that was kind of a fun little activity too.
And Sandra, do you mind if I just talk about another strategy that we can use?
Yes, please.
While we're waiting. So one of the other ideas that I was thinking about as I was thinking about this topic is, what are some community activities that we can do in a safe manner, maybe inside or like from our vehicle or outside walking. And one of the suggestions, or one of the thoughts I had, was to use holiday themed bingo cards, or even like scraps of paper, whatever you want. And as you're walking or driving by, checking off the items in the windows or on the streets or wherever you're walking or driving, of items that you see, like snowmen or Christmas lights or elves. Because there's some really great community like crescents that just go all out at Christmas time. So I think that'd be a really fun strategy. I don't know, something to get you outside. I don't know what anyone else's thoughts are, or if anyone else has seen anything like that, or.
Yeah, I love that idea. I mean, there's, some, even in going as a family for a drive around the neighborhood, there's some just beautiful houses or people go out decorating, and yeah, it would be a lot of fun to kind of make a little activity out of it. I think it's a great idea. So our poll, 71% are hoping to travel this year, and hugging is not very far behind, entertainment 69, hugging 63%. And then we have going back to the gym 20%, and going back to work 10%. Yeah, I think that comment it's nice if you have the option. I find it very nice to have the virtual option and be able to sort of balance my health with my work life. I actually quite like working from home. What about you guys, Noelle and Rory and Peter? What are your thoughts on sort of that virtual work space?
It depends on the week. The last 2 to 3 weeks that both my kids have been home brings back really great memories of the spring. I think it's challenging, for all 4 of us to be under one roof. But we've actually, between the spring and now, there's actually way more of a rhythm going on. Everybody kind of knows what we're doing. So we've all had good practice working together at home, whether it's in their rooms here downstairs. So it's definitely a balance, but it's feasible, like it's possible now. We know we can do it.
Yep.
Yeah, I
Wow.
agree. It's a matter of finding your rhythm, finding a routine. I know for the first 3 months of the lockdown, it was definitely an adjustment period, but shortly after that, I was actually able to go back to the lab under pretty strict conditions, and I've been back there since. But it's been, reduced capacity, reduced number of people in the lab, and I certainly do miss seeing all of the same faces in the lab at the same time, and definitely the social aspect. But soon enough, it'll return. How about you, Noelle?
Yes, you know what? Our university, like other universities, have been closed to students, and so we've transitioned to online learning for students. And so, if you think of something like nursing, it's really difficult to teach nursing virtually. So we're getting better at it, but we are safely teaching the nursing students, I should say, in the labs. So they can practice before they go into the hospitals and communities. But we are still also having students in the hospitals, which is great because we can still continue to graduate students so that we can have nurses help out on the front lines, so to speak. So I've been lucky. I've been able to protect myself by staying at home and working from home. I'm grateful for that because it is very scary. To live with IBD and to if you do have to go out because of your job, that's a huge amount of stress. So I think maybe we should talk about just some tips for reducing our stress, or how we're going to manage during the holidays, how are we going to reduce our isolation and feelings of isolation. Does anyone have any suggestions on what they do?
I have a little spot at the end of my bed with my yoga mat. So that's my time. And so I got into a rhythm with just exercising and doing something for me, separating myself in a different room for a short period of time. We also have a route around our neighborhood that we do we call it our COVID walk. So we have to do a minimal one lap around just to get outside. So those are things that we found to do.
Yeah, getting outside has been important for me just because I find I'm welcome to my basement and my office desk area. I feel like I've spent so many hours here. So I think getting outside, fresh air, some nature, exercise just kind of helps to clear your head and get your body moving, and just the therapeutic aspect of nature for me is so important, connecting in that way. So yeah.
Yeah, and even, you may not be feeling well some days, so, you don't maybe yoga, or maybe just sitting in quiet, just taking some deep breaths, that might be all you can do on a particular day because it is so stressful or you're feeling unwell, just to take some time for you. I think it's really, really important, because if you are working, well, it's, whether you're out in the world working, it's crazy busy right now, and with the Christmas season upon us, but also if you're working constantly at your desk at home too, you have to take frequent breaks as well. It's really important. So that's one of the things that I've learned, is taking that time, carving out that time, and I'm going to work really hard on doing that when, or when I do have some days off. I'm going to work really hard to take that time just for me.
Yeah, and someone actually made a really good point, which I can 100% relate to, and probably many of us can, is turning off the news, maybe taking a break from social media, and hear just that constant bombardment of COVID-related information, and some of it is not great information either, and it's just heavy in lots, and I find that I've had to do that at times, just I'm not even looking at that stuff right now. I need a break mentally from that. And a couple other people actually mentioned more dog walks. I think our pets are probably going to go into like post-traumatic stress or have like depression or anxiety once things hopefully return to normal at some point, because they're so used to having us around now and getting extra love and extra walks, and they're gonna be like, oh, where did my person go? So yeah, I think it's another great way in going out for walks with the animals. Try meditation. I find it helpful. The app Smiling Mind is great. Oh, thank you for that. That's great. I will so we'll definitely compile all of those. So just some few final thoughts, because now we're coming up to the hour. We know this has been a long session for everyone. Thanks for those hanging in there. Thinking about, I just want to pose the question to the audience and just really quickly the panel. What is one thing that you're grateful for from 2020 and maybe one goal towards 2021? Who wants to give that one a shot?
I could start. One thing I'm really grateful for, like living out here in Ottawa, away from my family. It's, I don't want to say given a good excuse, but it's enabled me to be able to keep in contact with my parents and my family a lot better. Being able to Zoom with them very regularly, as well as my old Crohn's and Colitis Canada chapter. I've been able to Zoom into their meetings. So that one and my current one here in Ottawa. So I've been sort of double dipping in two groups. Things that I guess a goal for next year. I guess keep on working on my PhD, and my comprehensive exam will be next. So my winter break will be a lot of studying. So getting through that.
Great. Noelle or Rory?
Yeah, so I think more grateful for, just taking some time and just slowing down, running around, doing all these different activities and this and that. It's not great that there's no sports and there's no activities and things to do, but it's really allowed us to appreciate the time that we have with our kids who are older. So probably time that we wouldn't be given with them on a day-to-day like we are. And for next year, I think just returning to normal and doing all the things that we kind of did before, and taking what we had from the past year and just kind of moving forward with those new ideas and just incorporating them more.
And for me, it's one thing that I'm grateful for is reestablishing those connections with so many individuals that I haven't been in contact with. So I'm grateful for that. And I think what I'm going to try and be mindful of or continue to take with me into 2021 is to take a moment to be present in the moment. It has been a busy year despite everything. And I think it's really good for us to remember to enjoy the little things. And this morning there was a beautiful sunrise, and my work colleagues texted and they're sending me pictures of this beautiful sunrise. And so just to go, get my butt off the chair and go look at the sunrise, it was, yeah. So that's my tip, is just remember the little things and enjoy them.
Yeah, so mine's gonna be similar. Definitely reconnecting with people, and I'm really fortunate. I live in a rural area. I think it's like a really good place to be during a pandemic when there's not as many people around to have to, navigate, when I'm out for a walk. And two of my brothers one just retired, but so work in the school board, and they isolated in July and came up and visited me, and that we spent a week together, and it was amazing because we haven't done that for years and years. And so it was just such a wonderful time just to hang out and connect like that. So super grateful for that time with them. Glad we were able to do that in the summer. And then moving forward, having some things return to normal, but also would love to keep virtual care. I'm all for that. So yeah, some things, I love traveling. I don't see it super close in the near future where I'm going to be comfortable, but would love to do some more traveling again. So, okay, so we're just a few minutes past. We'll quickly just post some final thoughts. We have a few quotes, positive thoughts for 2021. If Sarah can post that, and we'll just start to wrap up here. And so thanks everyone for hanging on a few minutes extra. But so I thought I would we would draw some quotes around that resilience, which I think a lot of IBD patients have because of living with IBD, and sometimes we don't recognize kind of that strength-based approach from, in spite of living with these diseases, we really learn a lot and, build kind of a grit because of what we go through. So just a few quotes. So to leave, before we leave you for the evening, on resilience, I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it. And that's by Maya Angelou. When we learn how to become resilient, we learn how to embrace the beautifully broad spectrum of the human experience. By Jada DeWalt. And then resilience is based on compassion for ourselves as well as compassion for others. And I think that's a really great note to leave us on, because I think sometimes it's easier to have compassion for others, but we also should practice compassion for ourselves and all the things that we go through as well. That one's by Sharon Salzberg. And just the quote of the year, though, is "You're on mute." I don't know how many times I've said that and how many times I've heard it, and I'm sure everyone can relate to that one. And we really want to wish you best wishes for a happy and healthy holiday season, and for and also a happy, healthy 2021, and the best for 21. And hopefully we have some good things coming, and it sounds fairly positive from the earlier panel. So thanks so much for your time this evening, and to Noel and Rory and Peter for being here, and for Crohn's Colitis Canada for putting this webinar event on. So thank you, everyone. Have a good evening and a great New Year and holiday season.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.